Grüezi miteinander und alle zusammen. Hello and welcome. This is a tutorial where we are going to talk about our brand new sample pack CYCLOPEDIA 2, which is out now on soundsfed.com. It includes over 7,000 unique and brand new samples and MIDI files, as well as 4 professional singers who contributed with loops and vocal phrases that are very, very inspiring and very useful for productions of all kinds in the field of progressive house, melodic house, Afro house, and as well organic house. We also have 11 guest musicians who performed violins, cellos, drums, fill-ins, flutes, the erhu, which is a Chinese string instrument, saxophones, guitars, and so on. We have my friend and artist partner Emmanuel Gonzalez from Sons of Maria, who contributed with a lot of samples as well. So you're having his take on certain samples in this sample pack as well, that very much rounds out the whole vision we had to create this huge 23 gigabyte sample pack. Yes, we're going to talk about the folder system in this video clip. There is another video on YouTube where I showcase the demo track that you see here in the back of my DAW. But here in this video, we really talk about the folder and subfolder system. So stay tuned. All right, we're starting with the one-shots first. The one-shots are having all these subfolders here inside. 16 subfolders. First, all the kick drums, which are having 12 subfolders in it as well. The signature kick drums, which are basically including some of the heavily used kick drums of mine that I used in the past 4 years. We're having a batch of progressive and melodic house kick drums here. 95 kick drums. We went all in here in this one. We're having some softer kick drums where we tried to include only the softer sounding kick drums, some harder kick drums that are for a little bit harder intended melodic house and progressive house tracks. We have analog and machine kick drums that are derived from drum machines and analog sources. We are having some organic house kick drums that are a little bit rounder and a little bit fuller. We're having some indie dance kick drums that are actually a mixture or a blend of electronic-based kick drums, but also some that are based on real kick drums. Then we're having some alternative real kick drums, which are real kick drums that are heavily processed in a very special way. Then we are having a batch of dark electronica kick drums that are a little bit more muffled, a little bit less full, a little bit thinner for environments like electronica, breakbeats, but can also be used as groove kicks in addition to your main kick, for example. We have a bunch of kicks with stuff that are found kicks that have certain, whether hi-hats inside or other additional noises to the kick drum that I sometimes use in my tracks, but they are sounding so unique that I did not want to process them and just have them here in this folder. We're having some house and tech house kick drums for a little bit more aggressive kind of kick drums. And we're having a folder of kick drums that are muffled, basically rolled off high end and just having a nice smooth top end and probably a little bit of transient designing. So you're having still a nice attack coming through. So these are the kick drums. There's a bunch here. I mean, there's hundreds of kick drums found here for all sorts of applications. I'm pretty sure you'll find your perfect kick drum here. Claps and snaps. Also here we have subfolders regular claps, thin claps, short low claps. These are kind of claps that you would go for in organic house or in Afro house. Claps where I tried to pitch the information, a few semitones, and also tried to mix them a little bit more muffled, made them very short and not too long, so they are actually really working well in this organic house and tech house environment. Then here is a new folder which is called Tech Filter Claps, which should represent this typical tech house claps that are not necessarily based on like classic 909 claps or these standard house claps, but are very much processed, very much pressed out the mid ranges, and yeah, very unique sounding here. If you are listening through these claps, you will instantly understand what this idea is about. Synthesized claps where we run certain noises through filters from synthesizers, certain envelope-shaped synthesizer claps. Here some Rezo claps that we already had in the first Cyclopedia pack as well, but we thought here it makes sense to include another batch of these very unique sounding claps. Then we have some real claps and real snaps and castanets, which are these Spanish finger percussions that sound very much like a snap. And here we have tonal clap enhancers, where we again gave you a bunch of claps that have a tonal information, or sometimes it's not even claps, it's just a certain percussion that we felt like could be used as a clap as well, or could be used as an addition to a clap if you want to create a little bit more unique sounding clap. So you find a bunch of these options here as well. They are all, as you can see, having the tonal information included here as well, so to be sure that it matches with your project. Then we're having the section of the snares, which are having a bunch of different subfolders as well. The regular indie sounding snares are basically indie dance and indie house snares that we found sound very fresh nowadays, and we hear them quite a lot in productions, and also me, I'm starting to use these kind of snares more and more in my productions as well. We excluded the resonant sounding indie snares. If you check out the snares in this folder, you will immediately understand what the idea is here. I just basically extracted the snares that have more of a resonant sound in it into this folder. So you basically, when you want to have a snare with a resonant sounding tone to it, then you go to this folder. If you want to have more regular, less resonant sounding snares, then it is this folder. Then we're having the progressive snares folder, where I try to collect and produce a batch of snares that go very well as 2 and 4 snares in an environment for progressive house and melodic house. I have a folder with big snares, basically, that are a little bit bigger than the progressive house snares. Can be very well fit into a fill-in section. For example, if you want to create a certain filling with a snare, then check out this folder. Then here, as we already had in the first Cyclopedia pack, a batch of 80 snares. I thought you can never have enough 80 snares, at least for me in my workflow. I'm always looking for this kind of typical 80 snares to work with. So I created another batch of 80 snares in this sample pack as well. And there are a batch of machine and noise-based snare drums. I refrained to include again 909 snares, 808 snares, and regular snares as we had it in the Cyclopedia 1 package. In general, actually, I tried to come up with new folders. I wanted to create new ideas of samples and not repeat myself. And for those who do not have the Cyclopedia 1 sample pack, check it out. It's definitely a nice addition to this one. So instead of just repeating myself and made another batch of same sounding samples, I really wanted to create an addition to what we already have in Cyclopedia 1 package. All right, then we have a very large rim shot section. In the Cyclopedia 1 package, we had this as well. We had this there in the snare section. Here we created an extra section for only rim shots and rims. We created a bunch of regular rims, also 909 in low, mid, and high. And we created certain designed rims where we figured out that this has huge potential. Basically, we sampled all sorts of wooden elements that basically we turned into rim shots. We also filtered certain rims, we layered certain rims, and yeah, that's where we came up with these 70 extra designed rim shots that are very useful as rim shots, as groove rims, or even as clap or snare replacements. Then we're having a small folder and small batch of rim claps where we layered rim shots and claps. Some of them are a little bit pre-shifted claps followed by a rim shot that can easily be placed in your DAW as a clap or a snare environment. So check out those. I did refrain of doing too many pre-shifted claps and snares because those I basically have in our Pegasus sample pack, which is containing a lot of pre-shifted claps and snares. So if you are looking for this kind of claps and snares, check out this sample pack. All right, then we're going into the hi-hat section. These are the closed hi-hats where we are again offering a few subfolders. So you're really only going for those short hi-hats that you're actually looking for. Here are the regular short closed hi-hats, some half opened hi-hats, which we did not have in the Cyclopedia 1 sample pack, but I thought this is something we need to actually include here in the follow-up Cyclopedia 2 package, because it's hi-hats that are not as long that we can say it's open hi-hats, but they're also not as close that we could use them as 16th note rolling hi-hats, right? So basically these half-opened hi-hats are designed to also be offbeat hi-hats when you do not want to have fully open hi-hats. We're having some closed machine and noise hats. I think we already had a batch of these kind of hi-hats in the first Cyclopedia pack, but I thought here the story is not really told all the way through. So we went again and fired up certain drum machines and recorded and manipulated and processed hi-hats to fit in that folder. And here is a new folder as well. There's 9 closed dirty mids hi-hats, which have very, very distinctive mid-range, do not have a lot of high-end information. They are very much playing in the mid-range, just to basically fill this harshness if you want. Sometimes having a hi-hat that supports your nicely sounding high-end frequency hi-hats, and to fit in as a mid-range hi-hat to break up the pattern a little bit. So you find these kind of hi-hats here. Then we're going into the open hi-hat section. Again, I programmed a bunch of layered open hi-hats. Similar idea as in Cyclopedia 1, but with different sources and different ideas and different process strategies. A bunch of 909 based hi-hats. You can never have enough 909 hi-hats, very useful in productions in all sorts of ways. We manipulated and produced and edited and processed them, so they are really fitting nicely as offbeat hi-hats. Then we're having some open real hi-hats. We didn't have that in Cyclopedia 1, so I had the full spectrum free to record open hi-hats from my drum kit in Nashville, as well as some drum kit that I sampled here from friends of mine. And then we are having some open noise hi-hats. Also here the idea is pretty clear, 14 hi-hats based on noises. Tambourines, 2 different folders here. I basically have a layered tambourines folder and a natural sounding tambourines folder. The natural one is basically less processed, less layered. The layered ones are heavily processed, heavily layered. You can basically drag and drop them in your project as also offbeat tambourines, and they should actually cut through in the mix. Shakers, also here we're having a few different subfolders. We're having the offbeat shakers. These are mainly shaker samples that I used in offbeat shaker environments in my tracks in the past 4 years. Then we're having some regular mid-frequency shaker shots, some regular high shaker shots, some metal maraca shots, which are having a very distinctive kind of sound, are also a little bit longer than the actual shaker shots, so I excluded them and put them in a separate folder. And then as a bonus, we gave you a certain amount of unprocessed shakers, which you can use to create your own custom shakers. Crashes and rides. Also here we're having some subfolders. We're having the designed crashes, some real crashes from drum kits that I sampled, as I already told you earlier. Some real crash cymbal stops, again from my sampling sessions with real drum kits. Some reverse crashes. Here I basically designed them by reversing some of the crashes that we recorded and manipulated them and also processed them in a certain way that they would make sense and I think I even wrote how long they are. Yes, you can see here 2 bar, 1 bar, 3 bar, 0.5 bar loops. And then we're having a batch of rides, and that's that section. Bongo, congas and djembes are also one-shots from some recordings of my bongos and djembes that I had in America, as well as a batch of congas from a very great percussionist that also provided certain percussion loops that we are getting to later. Then we're having some big Latin Afro percussions and flames. These are designed big Afro percussions where I really took certain amount of percussions, processed them in a certain way that they could be used as, for example, snare, tom replacements in Afro house productions, right? And also certain flames that you could use for fill-ins or other effects. Then we're having again a nice set of toms. And very important in my workflow as well are these low-end percussions, which are not necessarily toms. This can be everything. I beat on cushions, I beat on couches, beds, all sorts of boxes, and then manipulated these signals into low-end percussions that are very useful if you want to create certain groove between the kick drum and the bass line, right? And yeah, for me this is inevitable to use in my workflow, so I use them quite a lot. That's why you're having quite a bunch of these samples here in that folder. We're going to the Reso, Saps and Lasers. That's also a new folder where I programmed and recorded a lot of saps, sine sweeps, all sorts of these typical laser sounds that can be used as fill-ins, effects, or even as percussion, some of the samples. We're having some miscellaneous world percussion and Foley samples where I included the cowbell and clave samples in one folder, the guiro samples in one folder, the miscellaneous Latin percussions that didn't make sense to make a separate folder, so feel free to check those out. Maybe you find certain nice findings in that folder. I recorded a few school bells that I found on Reverb and eBay and sampled them here as well. They are actually very useful, actually, even if this sounds funny, but also there are a few loops in the loop folder made from these school bells. They have a very distinctive sound, but they are still rhythmic. And if you are working with these loops in combination with percussion loops and hi-hat loops and this kind of loops, and just place it in the background, you can actually make it sound very distinctive. So sounds funny, that school bell in this sample pack, but it's actually here for a reason. Then certain timbales as well, provided by percussionists that performed certain loops and one-shots for us. And then we're having the last folder, which are certain household percussions and fully cupboard percussions, household percussions in general. The pots I separated, as well as the glass samples, can be found here. So this is the one-shot drum section, which is, I think, 2,200 something one-shot drums here. So a big load of one-shots can be found here for all sorts of applications, all sorts of styles of house. Check them out. We are also offering this time, for the first time, section sales. So if you're only here for the one-shot drums, you can definitely just buy that and do not have to buy the full pack. And we're also having other section sales, such as just the vocals, in case you just are here for the vocals, or just the live instruments and so on. So check out the section sales if you don't want to buy the full package. But I definitely recommend the full package, because it goes very well together. And you can see how well this works together if you're checking out the video clip of our demo track that we produced with just samples from the CYCLOPEDIA 2 sample pack. All right, the Drumloop Constructions include 5 different subfolders. And the way we did this time is we created these drum loops as a full drum loop with kick drum and percussions, hi-hats, snares, and so on, fill-ins and effects sometimes even. And then we recorded section by section, and that's basically the construction idea here. So if you want to work with the full loop, then you can do that by just importing the full loop. It's also very helpful if you just want to preview what the loop sounds like. And if you then want to work with the single stems out of this construction kit, you can easily do that by importing actually just the parts that you need for your production. So I think we're having like between 10 and 14 construction kit in each of these subfolders, just for alternative drum loops. There we just have 5, yes, just 5 construction kits, which we took a slightly more creative turn than with the other construction kits here in the other 4 folders. All right, then we are having the top constructions. This here in the first subfolder, the regular top construction, is the same idea as for the full drum construction, but just here there is no kick drum involved, but you're having the full top construction here as well. And then you're having all the options of single stems like hi-hats, percussions, shakers, claps, and so on, as single stems, so you can easily work with the single stems as well. But here, as said, these are top loops. There is no kick drum information here, and this may be a little bit less low-end percussions than in the full constructions. Then we're having an African Toploop Constructions folder, where we are having 4 different constructions from a professional percussionist who does exactly this kind of African percussions and loops. He also provided us with one-shots from these sample loops, which can be found over here. And here are the 4 different constructions with each individual stem. Same here, we worked together with a Brazilian percussionist who provided 20 different construction kits that are in the same idea like the other construction kits. You have the full version here and then the single stem right underneath. As well, in this folder you find the extra one-shots from this recording session here. Then we're moving on to the percussion loops. And here we're having 13 different subfolders. We're having the designed organic top loops, which basically are similar to the regular top loops in the previous folder, but here you do not get all the single stems. There are certain stemming options, but most of them are basically full top loops. And then we're also having some Latin top loops here as well, also from a professional Latin percussionist who provided these extra percussions, as well as all of these one-shots out of this recording. We're having certain real hand clap loops, as you can see here. I offer them actually in dry and wet. So you find both here. The wet one is just having a slightly little bit of reverb inside. Then we're having the shaker loop section, where we recorded a bunch of shakers and processed them in a certain way that they fit this kind of music that we are targeting here. We even process them, or some of them, to a level where we would also spike out the transients a little bit, so they actually cut through in the mix and are not too much muddy and smoothed out. So we tried to really make them, sometimes even with certain gates, that we would really hear the actual transients of the shakers, which in my opinion is a real advantage of the sample pack as well. Then we have a folder where we worked with noise, with basic noise samples, and tried to create shaker loops with this noise information. We're having a bunch of tambourine loops again, where I bought a shitload of tambourines that I recorded in all sorts of ways. Then we're having bongo and conga loops. Also here the bongo loops are performed mainly by myself. Some conga loops that are performed by one of our percussionists who contributed samples and loops for this sample pack. Then we have some certain djembe loops that I performed myself as well, with the djembes that I have in Nashville. Guiro loops, also my performance. Bells, cowbells and claves. Now here you have these school bell loops that I was talking about earlier. Very useful, also the cowbell loops. If you put a little bit of reverb on top of them, sometimes might even work if you take out a little bit of transients, so they get a very nice harmonic sound that can work pretty well in percussion element loops. Then you're having glasses, pots and mugs loop. Similar idea to the Cyclopedia one, where we also had a lot of glass and pots loop. I think these, every time you record a different pot, a different glass, a different mug, they sound different. I sometimes even think when you record it with a different microphone or in a different room, you can get a pretty different sound out of these loops. So, I'm sorry. So I thought it was worth to create another round of new pots and glasses, and I also beat on all sorts of other surfaces like metal surfaces, wood surfaces and so on. So all these samples can be found here. Then here the rolling hi-hat loops. We had a batch of rolling hi-hat loops in the Cyclopedia one as well. Still, I thought we could take this to another level by making them a little bit more sophisticated, adding a little bit more detail, a little bit more extra texture to some new hi-hat loops here. So I created a batch of new rolling hi-hat loops where I tried to really make them a little bit more dynamic than the set of the Cyclopedia one samples of this kind. We are also having a short batch of ride loops. And then we're approaching, that was it here, yeah. That's the percussion loop section. Then we're approaching the fill-in section. Also here, a bunch of fill-ins. Here we are having the first folder, which was performed by a female percussionist. She made very beautiful samples here. I really love to use them. They fit right into all sorts of tracks of mine. Very nicely performed, very detailed, very beautifully mixed. Find them here. I also created a batch of vintage sounding acoustic fill-ins that I recorded with some old 60s microphones. I just recorded them in an environment of 2 overhead microphones, and then mixed and processed them to have them sound like in the 60s, 70s. So you have them sound a little bit more vintage style. Then we're having a bunch of Afro and world fill-ins. Some of them are performed by myself. Some of them are performed by one of the percussionists that contributed samples to this sample pack. Then we're having the designed short fill-ins. These are short designed fill-ins, not longer than 1 bar. And we're having extracted from that the longer complex fill-ins that can take up to, I think, up to 4 bars, between 2 and 4 bars of complex fillings. Very cool stuff there. Check them out. And then I had an idea to create a snare roll construction kit, so to speak. I was tired of this snare roll that already had a certain fade over a certain period of time. Because sometimes I want to use a snare roll on maybe 16 bars, say maybe just 8 bars, maybe just 4 bars. And when you already have this pre-made in a sample, then you're fixed to the length that the sample is, right? So I was like, let me actually create 4-bar loops in 8 note, 16th note, and 32 note. So you can basically drag these loops that are not fading in. They are consistent on a certain level. In your drag and drop it in your DAW, and then you're just extending this loop, whatever you need. If you need the 16th, for example, you import them. We can showcase this here once. You import them here. And you see there is no volume shaping here, and then you basically shape the volume yourself. If you want to have it longer, copy it and make it longer, right? And I think that's a pretty cool idea, how you can avoid having snare drum rolls from samples that are already having this volume shape in the sample itself. So find this. I think we are having 10 different construction kits with different snare rolls. I also here tried to bring in some extra dynamics, some extra small details, so they are not just sounding too static 16th, 8 or 32 notes sound. So or sometimes even certain tremolo effects going from left to right and stuff. And then also here we're having a folder of clap fill-ins. Very useful, came up in the past few years as standard fill-ins and sound design elements for our kinds of music. So these fill-ins can be found here. Then a big section here is the effect section, where we are having uplifters. And in the uplifter section, you're having these 6 subfolders, the micro sweeps / reverse claps. So these are very, very short claps that I reversed, some claps sometimes with even certain noise sweeps and stuff together. These micro sweeps are intended to use right in front of a drop or right in front of a peak, when your noise sweeps or your synth sweeps are basically already exhausted, but you need an extra sweep to go into the next section, right? So these micro sweeps can be found here. Then you're having short sweeps, 0.5 to 4 bars. You're having regular uplifters, 4 to 16 bars. You're having plain noise lifters 4 to 16 bars. You're having synth lifters that are basically 16 bars, all of them. But feel free to shorten them to your needs. Here, basically, I was like, I mean, you can pick also a certain part out of this 16 bar and just work with those. Works pretty well. I tried this myself, so there was no need to create 8 bars or 4 bar synth lifters here as well. Even though we already also have some 4 bar or 8 bar synth lifters also in the regular uplifter section. So some of them have also been filed there. And then also I created an extra folder with designed horn lifters where I took horn sounds or brass sounds as my source file, manipulated them and put a certain reverb tail on top, or sometimes just time stretch them all the way to 30, 40 seconds, and then tried to create a certain lifter, very unique sounding lifters that came out of that session. Down lifters. Also here we divided them into 4 subfolders: noise downlifters, effects downlifters, pitch bended and synth downlifters, and as well a very new folder idea that I had, some short fill downlifters. So let's say you're in a drop and you want to create a little fill in that maybe is 1 bar or 2 bars or just half a bar, then sometimes you work with certain downlifters or the certain downers that go down and straight back up into the next section of the drop. So I tried to create certain downers for exactly this purpose, right? They are, as you see, mainly 1 bar, some of them 0.5 and some of them 2 bars, but mainly 1 bar. Use them as exactly this purpose, or if you just want to create in a certain part of your track a short little different fill-in, use these short fill downers together with maybe an extra fill-in or maybe a sweep or something. This could sound very cool. Then we're having impacts. Here I also excluded some different kinds of impacts. We're having the full clean impacts. We're having some more explosive impacts that are having a very explosive sound. We're having some low impacts that are mainly muffled on the low end, but still having a certain transient attack that they are cutting through in your mix. We're having the sub-benders that are a sine sweep or a certain sweep. And we're having some high and mid impacts that are made from different kinds of percussions or pitched drums and synthesizer information that we thought could be very useful as high or mid impacts. Some of them are tonal. Those that are tonal, you see here all the key information right behind the actual file. We are going to the tonal effects. Again, we provided a ton 82 tonal effects, all sorts of effects, very useful for sound design. If you checked out or will check out my walkthrough of the demo track here in another video, then you can hear some of these tonal effects in action and what they actually can do and what they are intended for. Tonal risers, we had a batch of tonal risers in the CYCLOPEDIA 1 package as well. Still, the story, in my opinion, is not completely told here, so we came up with a bunch of new ideas of tonal risers. Very useful, very organic sounding, a lot of processing, so you don't have to do this anymore, very unique sounding. Atonal effects, we didn't have that folder in the first CYCLOPEDIA pack, where we really tried to have samples that do not have much of a tonal information. There are some effects here that you see have a certain key assigned as well. Even though they are still atonal, they might still have a certain key information. So in that case, I wrote the key that I thought this could be in, right? Don't get me wrong if sometimes this is not actually the actual key and somewhere in between, but that's what I thought would be most accurate in that case. find that here, as well as a batch of modular, or in this case semi-modular effects made from certain semi-modular synths that I have here in my studio. Screams and Signals folder that I'm very proud of. I once bought a trailer music sample pack that had a folder with screams and signals inside. And I became a fan of these sounds in my productions. I placed these samples in drops or as effects and stuff. And when I prepared for the CYCLOPEDIA 2 package, it was pretty clear for me that I want to create a batch of these sounds myself. So it's actually my wife and me who screamed and yelled into the microphone, as well as certain signals here that are derived from samples, from synthesizers, or from certain horns. And I processed all of these samples and vocals and put a lot of distortion on them, a lot of EQing, compression, reverb, delay, and so on, to just have this very unique sounding scream and signal sounds. Brahms and brass shots. Also, this is something we had in the first CYCLOPEDIA 1 package. We have staccato, shorter brass sounds, we have marcato, longer brass sounds, and we have some horror benders, half step up, half step down, which basically are marcato Brahms that have a certain half note pitch up or half note pitch down information. You hear this lately in a lot of productions and a lot of cinematic trailers, so we thought to add a batch of this kind of samples here as well. And then we are having reverse vocals, which are performed by my wife. We recorded a lot of sample ad-libs and processed them in a certain way. Some of them are sounding very natural as a reverse vocal sample, but some of them are also heavily processed reverse vocals, right? A lot of them are not even sounding as a typical vocal anymore. They are more like an effect. So I use them pretty much also as effects in my tracks, as tonal effects. That's why here you have 107 reverse vocal effects. But they are really sounding very, very different. I first thought to make different folders for different sounding reverse vocals, but then I understood that mainly the purpose of these reverse vocals will always be more or less the same. So I decided to put them all into one folder. Then the atmosphere section, also this section, compared to the first CYCLOPEDIA, it became quite big. In the first CYCLOPEDIA we just had a few hundred of these atmosphere loops. Here it's quite some more. So first of all, I created a bunch of sand drones which can be used as underlaying drones, pad drones in the key of your track. We already had this kind of drones in the first sample pack. This is another batch of sand drones. You can never have enough of these sand drones. I used the ones from the first sample pack until I couldn't hear them anymore, until I would be very tired of them. So I had to create another batch of sand drones. And here they are, 60 more very beautifully sand drones. Some of them are a little bit thinner and serve the purpose of fitting into more sensitive, more emotional environments, and some of them are a little bit thicker, a little bit more open, that are fitting and matching with a little bit more epic kind of track. So check them out, very useful. Tonal beds, a batch of pads and certain tonal beds derived from sometimes even certain samples that we put into crazy amounts of reverb, sometimes through 5 different reverbs and stuff. Then we muffled them with filters and all sorts of other processing to become this kind of tonal beds. Very useful also for sound design, very useful to use in combination with the sand drones, for example. Then we're having the single note drone tension. Also an idea that I came up with in during the production of the CYCLOPEDIA 2 sample pack. In the first sample pack, we had the high string notes. This story is told. We did all high string notes possible in that sample pack, so there was no need to recreate this one more time. So here I had another idea, and this is something that I cannot go without anymore. In all of my tracks, I'm using these samples now. The idea was to create samples that I sampled certain organic live notes from flutes, trumpets, oboes, pianos, but also from synthesizers and even from percussions with long reverb tails and stuff, and then resampled these samples, these one notes, and tried to manipulate them with time stretching and pitching and all sorts of ways to become these single note tension drones. And if you want to hear them in action, check out the video clip where I go through the demo track here, where I explained and showcased exactly what they are doing and why they are in a certain spot. They are really intended to use as a harmonic extra element to your sound design, as an extra element to your melodic design as well. Because since they are single notes, you can also use them as a fifth note or as a third note or wherever it harmonically makes sense in your track, and use them as a haunting element coming in and out. This can in chill and melodic house make very, very beautifully melodic shifts. So check those out, very useful. That's why I created a bunch of these single note tensions. It took me actually quite a bit of time until I finished all of them. I went several times through all of them to make sure that they are really unique and not just regular synthesizer one-shot bounced into a single note tension. So these are really all resampled, reshaped, and so on. So very useful, very unique. Pad swells. Here we have full pad swells, again over a period I think of 4 bars. Most of them are 4 bars. They just swell nicely up. Also very cool for transitions if you go from one to another part in your track. We had certain pad swells already in the CYCLOPEDIA 1 pack. Here we created a new batch of different pad swells. We're having a low evolving Atmos pads. The idea here was to create long-drawn sound design pad patches that can be put on top of an existing track. So if you feel like that your track needs some extra high-end crispness, maybe a little bit more harmonics there, then feel free to work with one of these 20 evolving Atmos pads. You can easily just place them on top, and I tried them actually out and they work pretty well just as extra layers in a breakdown or in a drop if you want to have some haunting, nice high-end pads. Some of them even work as standalone breakdown, full breakdown patterns, so you can use them even as a full pattern in a breakdown without any other samples to it. Then we're having a batch of glissandos. We had these glissando samples or similar glissando samples already in the first sample pack. Here is a new batch of glissandos. Some of them are also offered dry, or all of them are offered dry, but only some of them are offered with MIDI too, because some of them we created actually with synthesizer arpeggio functions, where we did not have the MIDI on hand, but some of them we programmed ourselves and added the MIDI files in an extra folder here. Then another very beautiful folder here are the vocal atmospheres. My wife performed these vocal atmospheres by singing certain ad-libs in a long drawn way, and then I would put certain effects and reverbs and processing and extra resampling and manipulate these vocal atmospheres to be not really vocal but more an organic atmosphere, right? So that's why I placed these samples, and also here we have almost 100 of these vocal atmospheres. Very useful sound design. That's why here this folder is in the atmosphere section and not in the vocal section, even though this is based on real organic vocal performances. Environmental textures / field recordings. This is new. We didn't have this section in the first cyclopedia. We thought it is time to also round out the package with certain field recordings. Very useful for breakdowns or just adding certain textures, organic textures to your track. Also became very popular in the past 4 years. So we went out with our Zoom recording device and recorded all sorts of environments here around our area in Zurich, and some of them in America, as well as some of them we recorded when we were visiting my wife's parents in Moldova. So you have a batch of very beautiful sounding sounds from the countryside of Moldova as well. Very unique, very special. You have forest samples, a batch of international airport samples from the airport, which is right outside my house here, 5 minutes from where my studio is. Then we're having some main train station samples where we went to the main train station in Zurich and recorded certain samples there. We have some rain flatland samples, some on the beach samples where we went to the beach, where we recorded samples in the summertime on the beach, certain summer nights samples where we recorded all sorts of noises and environments in a summer night. And as I said already here, we're having a batch of countryside samples from Moldova, and as well a few that I recorded in Nashville, and a batch of extra environments of like bathroom sinks, dripping, pouring water, pouring rice and whatnot can be found here. This is a small section here, but very effective, very useful for our kinds of music. Then we are approaching the bass loop section. Here we created 4 subfolders, one with legato bass lines. If you're familiar with the first cyclopedia one, then you should also get the idea here. The bass lines are long drawn out, legato, so they are basically without any breaks, no big rumbling staccatos, just long drawn sustained legato bass lines. You're getting the MIDI files of each of these 55 loops here as well. I programmed some progressive main bass lines that are these typical progressive house bass lines. As well here you're getting the MIDI files to all of these performances. Rolling bass lines, where we have these modern rolling bass lines in the 16-note environments. Still, I brought in some different kinds of dynamics. I tried to make them still not sounding too static, not sounding too sounding the same. I tried these 20 samples to still sound unique and have a unique kind of MIDI file as well. So check out the MIDI files for these ones here. And I also created 20 Afro bass lines / Afro knock bass lines that are having this very typical low-end knocks in combination with a sub bass that go very well in this very heavily busy percussion environments that Afro house is currently sounding like. So these 4 bassline folders are here. Then we're going into the synth and arpeggio loops section. First, the biggest and most extensive folder are the arpeggios. Also here we went the extra mile and programmed themic arpeggios, where which is a blend of lead sounds and arpeggios, right? We wanted to create this so you can use them as lead sounds, but you can also use them as an arpeggio sound or maybe together with another arpeggio sound. So this kind of lead themic arpeggios can be found here. You get the drive files of all of them as well as the MIDI files. We're having a bunch of melodic arpeggios that are more melodic, a little busier than the themic arpeggios, but not as rhythmic as the rhythmic arpeggios here in the 7th folder that are really only here or programmed to be a support in a rhythmic way underneath or in between of the rhythm section and the melodic section. Also here for all the melodic loops you find the dry and the MIDI files attached in each folder. Then we're having a certain batch of afterlife arpeggios. Here I performed these popular afterlife steps in loops where you also get the dry and the MIDI files. Sine arpeggios in my productions very useful for also drone arpeggios, which can be used instead of a drone instead of a pad drone. I'm going with a sine arpeggio that has a little bit more rhythmic and melodic approach than a pad, but is still not as much in the forefront of the mix than an actual lead or something that would take the attention away from the actual idea. So you have these sine arpeggios here with dry and MIDI files attached. And I also created a set of emo snowfall arpeggios. We already talked about this emo snowfall track in the Cerberus 1000 preset pack for X1 Serum. I'm a big fan of this track Snowfall and this kind of emo sound. So I created a batch of this kind of sounding loops, which can also be used very good in our kind of progressive music, right? So also that's why I thought this section needs to be included in the sample pack as well. Deep house arpeggios, as the name says, they are a little bit more staccative, maybe a little bit more or less busy than the actual rhythmic or melodic arpeggios used or produced mainly to fit into these typical deep house environments than the rhythmic arpeggios we already talked about. And then we also included a short amount of Afro drone arpeggios, which are these one-note arpeggio drones that are lately used in a lot of Afro house tracks. Find these ones here as well with dry and MIDI files. There will be much more of these Afro drone arpeggios in another sample pack that we are going to release in November in collaboration with our friends from Basic Waves. All right, then the next section is the synth and melody loops. Here I basically created 36 synth and lead melody loops that can be used as leads or as certain additional leads in combination with your actual melodies. They are not that busy, they are really laid back, sometimes also have a lot of headroom in between of the phrases, so you can use them also as answers and question-answer stuff. We have here dries and MIDIs as well because it's synth and melody loops. Then I created a batch of dub chords, the typical deep house and techno dub chords you would be familiar with in all of these very famous tracks in that dub kind of genre. Find the dry and the MIDIs here as well. We're having mellow house groove chords, which really serve the purpose of having certain groove synths that we can place and work with in the drops. This actually, as you see, gestern means in German yesterday, so I created these samples yesterday because I really thought the sample pack lacks of certain groove mellow samples that I can work with in the drops. where sometimes you need something more than just a bass line and an arpeggio, or sometimes you don't even want to use an arpeggio and you want to work with certain chords. So that's why I came up with these groove mellow chord ideas that are synthesized, staccative chord progressions, or sometimes just standing chords that are working very well in drops, and maybe also in certain breakdowns to approach a drop or something. Same with the dub chords. They were also created yesterday in the morning, just to serve the same purpose, to have some more staccative elements I can work with in the drops. So these 2 folders I added yesterday, took out an extra day of my time and created these to really be sure that we have covered all the possible options to create a full track from scratch to finished production with this sample pack. We're having just a small amount of keyboard sounds, just a few keyboard melodies that I thought could work very well in that sample pack. And we're having 2 different subfolders of pads. On one hand, the regular pads, performed over 16 bars. And you get the MIDI files as well in case you want to use your own custom pad sound. And then we have certain stutter pads. Here, as you can see, there are no dries and no MIDIs, just for the reason that this is resampled stuff. I created them sometimes out of pads, out of lead sounds, sometimes even samples that I layered and then put them through a certain gate plugin, or shaped the gates and the LFOs to volume shape the stutter effect to really get this very typical stutter pads. So I wanted to come up with a little bit more than just regular pads in a stutter environment. So this is mainly resampled stuff that I overly processed until I was having a certain sound that was representing something unique and not just a regular pad that you can chase through a stutter effect as well. All right, that's the synth and arpeggio folder. Another big folder is the piano loops. We didn't have piano loops in the first Cyclopedia one, so we could go all in here as well, which I actually did. These are emotional pianos in the first folder. They are created in the way that I sampled our piano in Nashville, and I sampled also the piano that my wife had in her home house in Moldova. I sampled them key by key, certain velocity layers, certain round robin layers, and created actually a certain contact patch, a certain sampler patch, so I can play it wherever I am on this planet on my MIDI keyboard and create my own melodies. We will actually coming up with these contact libraries next year in another library, but for now we performed these emotional pianos all with these contact libraries from that pianos of ours. That's why you're getting actually the MIDI files from all of these performances as well, in case you want to use your own piano sound, where you can find all these 52 sample constructions. Some of them, as you can see, I broke down into a full sample where you can hear all the layers together, but then I also stemmed out the chords and the melody stem separately for you to be completely flexible and work with the single stems. And you can see some of them are constructions, some of them are actual just one performances, which you always see. The number of the sample is the number, and then you have an A for the full, a B extension for the chords, and a C extension for the melody. Then we are having a batch of soft piano chords, which are a little bit softer. Some of them are a little bit more melodic. Some of them are a little bit simpler, which can be found here. Also, the MIDI files are attached in case you need the actual MIDI files. Then here we are approaching the section with the live performance of some of the guest musicians. We had a great cellist contributing with cello loops. Very cool, very useful, very beautiful sounding for our kind of music. You have them once the way we compressed, reverbed and EQ'd them, and once the dry initial loop in case you want to do this processing yourself. We're having a great violinist included that performed a beautiful amount of violin loops as well here, the dry options and our processing options. We're having someone that performed the erhu, which is a Chinese string instrument. Same here, you're getting the processed and the dry options in a separate folder. Then we're having a batch of flute loops, same idea, processed and dry samples included. Then we have a saxophonist that performed 93 loops of saxophone. You also get all of the dry samples here as well. And then finally we are having a set of guitar loops performed by two different guitarists who both contributed with some beautifully sounding guitar loops. As you can see here, some of them are construction kits where you get the basic rhythm, a melody and certain cloud guitars on top of it. The clouds actually are very beautifully working as sound design as well. Very cool. The dry information here as well if you want to create your own clouds out of these performances. So that's the live acoustic performances by some of our guest musicians that contributed samples to our sample pack. And then we are approaching the last section in our sample pack, which are the vocals. We are having 4 different professional singers, female singers that contributed samples and hooks and full top line tracks to this sample pack. You're getting always the full wet stem. You're also getting all the wet leads and all the dry leads from all of these different hooks and different vocals. And I also included the unprocessed files here. In case you want to tune, compress, EQ and cut the vocals differently, feel free to check out the unprocessed files here. Those are really the actual recordings that we got provided by the singers. The dry versions that are included here on top are basically our mix down of the recording, but without reverb or delays. Same here for all the other singers. You're getting the dry and the wet, and you're getting an unprocessed version of all of these loops as well. And then here the 5th folder is basically just me performing a few Afro shouts. That's pretty simple here. I tried to imitate certain Afro yells and shouts and then process them a little bit. They actually work better than I intended, so I think they can be very useful in current Afro house music. So that's basically the walkthrough of our folder system for the brand new CYCLOPEDIA 2 sample pack. Over 7,000 samples, almost 23 gigabytes of samples and MIDI files, which are out now on soundsfed.com. Check it out. And also if you want to check out the walkthrough video of our demo track, check out the other video, which is live on YouTube. And check out the sample pack, make great music with it, and I hope you all stay safe. Bye guys, thank you.